I'm Andrew Vaughn, and I was raised in the Presbyterian Church of America, or PCA. I also attended a Bible chapel, as well as a Chinese Baptist church, as well as a non-denominational / Southern Baptist church in high school. Right now, I currently do not attend any church at all since 2021. My family was very religious before I was born. I am the eighth of 9 children. My family raised the first few in my family under a very religious household, controlling on what music, what media they ingested, what words they said, and how they dressed and that sort of thing. By the time I came around in 98, they had been raising kids for about 10 years at that time. So I was raised in a much less strict household, much more lax. As a result, I was able to listen and engage with a lot more different media than my older siblings were. I was raised in a PCA church of about 80 to 100 people. It was very conservative, very traditional in a sense, where we had a very low-key worship style where we would sing hymns and psalms with just an organ mostly, sometimes with a flute as well. When I was about 14, because it was such a small church with very few children, I started going to different youth groups around the area. So I went to a Bible chapel youth group in 7th to 8th grade. I went to a Chinese Baptist youth group as well from also 7th to 8th grade. I went to both at the same time. I went to Southern Baptist non-denominational youth group from 2014 to 2016. So from 9th grade till junior year of high school. So I was homeschooled from kindergarten till the graduating high school. I believe it was also a Baptist homeschool group. We met at a Baptist church, and so it was about 500 families, I believe, at the time. My curricula was Abeka and Saxon. Abeka had a lot of creationism rhetoric in its works. They would have passages to tell me not to listen to anything that says millions and millions of years ago, which was interesting because I also took Apology of Science, which had a bit of a middle ground view on evolution. So I was not taught strict creationism in science. I was taught the idea of micro and macro evolution, with microevolution being small changes over time. The science book was also pro-vaccine that I was reading. I was taking a pro-vaccine science rhetoric while at the same time I was being told anti-vaccine rhetoric in the church I was attending at the time. So that was happening concurrently. And there was a time in 2014 where at the Bible chapel youth group I was attending, that I was being taught intelligent design while my science book was contradicting that at the same time. When I was first learning science, the Christian community was pretty much pro-vaccine all the way. There was really no problem with it. Around 2018, 2019, I was hearing more and more people become skeptical of vaccination. And then in 2020, when COVID came around, a great deal of Christians were skeptical of vaccination. And the overall reaction to COVID was probably the largest inflection point as to my disillusionment with the church. And part of that was just being against vaccination. If we're talking political overtones, my frustration with the church definitely was starting with that. There was such an air of coldness and a lack of sympathy and compassion that was present in the PCA church I grew up in. And I first noticed it towards immigrants and the poor. I noticed that when I started working in fast food in 2015, that the rhetoric I had been taught about immigrants from the people at the PCA church was largely untrue, when given the fact that the fast food place I worked at was full of people who were undocumented immigrants. And the same people who would come in to church and complain about immigrants, making everything worse, were living a lifestyle that was supplanted by immigrants. And they would come into work and they would receive fast food from me personally, made from people who had no papers. And then they would go into church on Sundays and complain about the very same thing. So there were definitely political reasons why I was getting frustrated with the church. I live in Houston. The rhetoric towards immigrants is more covert than overt now. The zeitgeist has changed a bit to where you can't openly say a lot of things that you used to be able to. So the stigma is still present in many ways, but people are just simply better at hiding it. Most of the churches I attended either never really addressed the issue or would enable the issue on a systemic level. The non-denominational Southern Baptist church I attended the youth group of, for instance, was largely more progressives than the PCA church I attended, but there were still a great number of people who would just simply vote conservative and either ignore the issue or perpetuate it. One of the main reasons why I no longer attend that church is partially because of how they treated my parents. My dad is 60 years old. He has raised 9 children. They are all in college or older now. Yet they still treat him as if he's a naive 40-year-old who doesn't know what he's talking about. I've always found them to be very condescending towards him. My dad personally, he has his own decisions to make, so I'm not going to tell him he can't attend. If he wants to, that's his choice. But I've never liked the disrespect I've seen them give him. I've never liked when they act like my mom is invisible. That happens very often too. There's been multiple times where we've been ignored or treated differently or excluded from certain things, and that's never sit right with me. Part of me wonders if it's because of our mentality. Part of me wonders if it's because of our racial background, but I don't think I'll ever know for sure. So immigration was a big frustration point for me. There was the Syrian refugee crisis in 2015, I believe. That was another point of frustration for me because you had people who would voice sympathy, but they would refuse to admit anyone. That was repeated in 2021 when we left Afghanistan, where people repeatedly said it's terrible what we're doing to the Afghan people, but they wouldn't want to harbor any refugees at all or even assist them on any level, which was a huge point of frustration. There were attitudes towards pregnant teenagers that I didn't agree with. The attitude towards sexual assault in the church was a big frustration point for me. There was a lot of modesty movement. So there was shaming women for wearing shorts or for not dressing the right way, in quotation marks. There was victim blaming. For instance, if a woman did get pregnant at a wedlock at a young age, there would be some stigma towards them until after they delivered the child, and suddenly the stigma would disappear. I don't understand that. That was another thing. There was very much a lot of homophobia, a lot of very ignorant things being said about the LGBT community. That was another major inflection point. There was liturgy being taught that was ignorant of those people and what their experiences are genuinely like or what they are genuinely like. And then COVID was probably the biggest example for me of realizing the fallacies that were present in the church, where you had an act of God, where you had a disease, something highly objectively wrong or bad that you need to account for, almost like a natural disaster, if you will. And yet the thing became politicized. A great deal of people at the church disagreed with masking and vaccination and social distancing. And my Presbyterian church reacted to the whole thing with a great deal of apprehension. They were more frustrated by the fact that they couldn't meet in person than the fact that there were people in hospitals who were dying. And they acted like a spoiled child, to put it in hyperbolic terms. And that really disillusioned me after a while, just seeing how people react to something that is so incredibly obviously something that you need to be cognizant of, to have them react as if they are simply being inconvenienced when several people in my life were actually dealing with intubation and long COVID and medical bills. And some people I know even had relatives who passed away from COVID. The Bible chapel I was at youth group with, shortly after I left there in 2014, I want to say a year or two after that, there was a grooming scandal of some sort. I believe a youth pastor who was well into his 30s was trying to talk to someone who was underage. The church split after that. For that reason and several others, I would not attend that church again. The non-denominational Southern Baptist Church, about a year after I left there, so maybe 2018 or 2019, the pastor stepped down because he was unfaithful to his wife. He admitted it publicly. And for that reason, I wouldn't attend there as well. And in the homeschool group, there was a professor who was teaching theology, I believe, at HCU. It's now HCU. It was previously Houston Baptist University. Now it's Houston Christian University. He and I would debate occasionally about theology. I think he has 4 or 5 kids, but he left his wife and is now living with a man in Florida. So that is another scandal, if you will, of inauthenticity or adultery, whatever you want to call it. I have a person I know, I don't think we're friends, we're more like acquaintances, but she was raped as a child, I want to say 9 or 10 years old, on a church playground. She hasn't come forward with her story. She's told me, but she's never come forward with the church about it. And I don't know what happened to her assaulter. I assume he still attends. And there's someone else who's very close to me who she was adopted and she was being molested by her foster family. She actually did come forward to the church, but they completely bungled the whole thing. They did not speak to local authorities about the matter. They only spoke to them privately about the matter altogether. And what ultimately happened was the foster family ended up leaving to Indiana. So nothing, they could not have done anything more wrong. They simply just gave the foster family time to run away and escape from the problem. I previously would advocate a lot for more mental health training as well for church leaders, because I can't tell you how many times you've got this confused or concerned 13 or 14-year-old girl who's going to come forward to someone in the church and say, hey, like, I don't feel comfortable by how I'm being treated. And it could be nothing, it could be something terrible. And the way that the adults in the church, either their parents or their pastors of some sort, the way they've handled it has just been completely botched handling of the whole thing. They either make the person in question feel worse for coming up, they don't provide them a safe environment to talk about what's bothering them, or they alert the person who's doing the problematic behavior. So that gives them enough time to either escape or to cover their tracks or to blame the victim. I think I've seen that, I don't know, 10, 20 times on a personal level on things that were largely innocuous, from complaints about how a man commented on their appearance, or from things that were legitimate assaults or life-altering behaviors. It does feel like I have less of a community now on a nominal level. Like I don't attend a weekly gathering of a lot of people. So it definitely feels like I don't see large groups of people as often, but I have multiple friends in different circles. So I have friends from college that I still spend time with. I have friends from old jobs that I still hang out with. I have photography friends that I will take photos with. I have filmmaking friends that I will work with on projects, or we'll just meet for general events around the area, around Houston. I have a large family, so I spend a lot of time with my family there, and there's a great sense of community there as well. From all the different churches I've attended, there doesn't seem to be any particular stigma towards me personally. I'm not ostracized. I still talk to some people from each of those communities on a at least a semi-regular basis. I would say that I have like 4 or 5 different friend circles that I spend time with. Given how fragile and fleeting the human species is, I still believe that there are higher beings, at least, or a higher being, or a deity at least. I do believe in a God. I believe that the Bible has been so influenced by the cultures of the last 2,000 years that it's very difficult to tell if that it does preach a true message or if the contemporary Bible preaches the true message. I find that very difficult to fully grasp or to fully assess. So that's kind of kept me away from Christianity as a religion. And I don't really have any interest in other religions that I've looked into, such as Buddhism or Islam or that sort of thing. I would say I lean towards agnostic, but ultimately, the only thing I really think of as to when I die is the Keanu Reeves answer that the ones who love us will miss us.